Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Sam Shea from theworkonlinecourse.com and 10pointwellness.com. And today I'm interviewing Grace Bell from Grace with Work or Work with Grace?
Work with Grace.
Work with Grace, that's right.
Yeah.
Workwithgrace.com. So just all one word, workwithgrace.com, no dashes or spaces, correct?
That's right. You got it.
Okay. So now, Grace is a certified facilitator for the work, and I wanted to ask you guys, how did you come across the work and your journey to get involved with the work?
Yeah, I love that. I came across the book first, Loving What Is. So in my circles, this was 2003, and I think it's when it just came out in paperback. I was waiting for it to come out in paperback. You know, I had a lot of self-help books on my bookshelf, and I was in circles with people who would read such a thing that would be popular. I had graduated with a graduate degree in applied behavioral science, and so I kind of like whatever was the latest thing. I definitely wanted to read, had my hands on it right away, and I got Loving What Is, and I read it cover to cover, and was so impressed. Like I was kind of amazed. Like, oh, she's talking about question your thoughts even on this. So I recognized something while I read the book, but then I put it down and I didn't really do anything with it at all. Like it didn't really change my life. I even joke sometimes. I tell a little story, but I tried to do the work. I had young children at home, and I was mostly stay-at-home mom. I worked at home doing some things, but I sat on my couch, you know, while child was napping, another child was in kindergarten or whatever was happening at the time, and started to, you know, okay, now I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do the work now. And I wrote a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. I wrote it on my neighbor, my literal neighbor. And, you know, I was like, well, she is kind of annoying. So that sounds, you know, doing it on my neighbor sounds fine. And I answered the questions on the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. And then I could figure out how to take that one thought, like it was, she calls too often, comes over, knocks on the door, interrupts, you know, needs to borrow something too often. And I put that down on on a piece of paper, you know, to then begin to answer the questions. And I just was almost stumped even with, is it true? It's kind of like, huh. And I remember I just got up and did laundry, you know, and, oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to keep trying to do the work. That's right. Let's go back to that, you know, kind of leaf through the book. It sounded pretty good, but it just sort of fizzled. And I definitely consider when I look back, if you had asked me at the time, oh yeah, I did the work, you know, I did the work on my neighbor. No, I didn't do the work at all. I didn't do the work, not until I went to the school, which was about a year and a half later. So, yeah. So that was my first encounter, though, and I loved reading the book. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. And I've got Loving What Is, and it's just all, you know, looks beaten and pages folded over and things that I go back to all the time.
So how would you describe the work to someone who's never heard of it before?
That is such a great question. I think in some ways that's you know, if you could speak that in a way to different people who are asking in a short, concise amount of time, boy, that'd make things easier. I usually say it's a way of looking at your own mind and pausing, slowing down to see if what you're thinking is really true. But even before that, see what it is you're even thinking, why you're reacting and responding as you are. Most people do get that they, you know, somebody says something and they have a reaction. And you can sort of study that instead of just, you know, be yanked around like a dog on a leash and just follow the reaction and, you know, be run by that. And like, a lot of people are also interested and familiar these days with, and maybe for a long time, with how your mind, you know, sometimes this moves into sort of positive thinking, negative thinking. I'm in a mood that is more depressive or negative oriented, and then there's a positive way of looking at things, and they get sort of training their mind or changing their mindset or working with that. And sometimes some of these teachings it's around the same arena. And I would say, if anybody's speaking to me that way about it, like, oh, like getting a positive mindset, you know, I'll say, well, this is actually seeing what's going on when you feel uncomfortable and diving into that more deeply. Because then when you really explore that, investigate it, and understand it for yourself, things are revealed, and then you understand yourself, and you might not repeat the same process anymore.
So how would you differentiate between the work and positive thinking, or
Yeah.
or the secret?
Yeah, yeah. I loved thinking about that when all of that came out. It was great. Um, the most simple way is positive thinking is there is an effort to push your mind into a certain direction, or get things. I'm going to put, it's almost like I'm going to open up my mind here and put positive thoughts into it without really looking at what's bothering you.
Hmm.
You might see what's bothering you. That's maybe why somebody's drawn to orienting themselves in a more positive way. They can see that something's going on here in my own consciousness and my psyche that is leading me into feeling uncomfortable, unhappy, feeling negative. But all right, so then the solution. Well, let's just move away from that and avoid it and look over here at positive. That's the tricky part. You can get a little, it's almost can be a little crazy making. I realized at a certain point, like if wake up and you're supposed to look in the mirror and say affirmations. I mean, I've done all this stuff too. Long ago, I am a happy, peaceful person. And then inside there's a voice that says like, no, you aren't. Are you nuts? Then you got like like a battle going on. And it gets a little, then there's just such a battle. You're not really giving voice to each other and relaxing. So yeah, it can be a little crazy making depending on your positive affirmation. If you really don't believe it, it's going to be slightly nutty for you, I think.
So people can, decal a positive thought on the brain, but they're just putting the thought there, but they actually don't physically believe it. It doesn't actually, the body doesn't actually resonate with that thought. It's actually a stressful thought, not a positive thought. Even though on the surface it sounds like a positive thought.
Yeah, I think that does happen. It's sort of like something set up with the comparison in a way is made internally. And some of the thoughts and the ways we react that feel troubling are very unconscious. They're kind of like they're sort of underlying under the surface. Byron Katie herself will say like the underworld, or sort of part of an underworld, and they're just in you, and they're very speedy, and it's kind of how it's gone, or maybe since childhood you've had some sort of response that you always make, that seems to be the way to go, or the way you're handling a situation. And I find that until I've really looked at that and kind of exposed it and understand it, give it voice, then it's just going to stay there in place. So no matter how many positive thoughts or affirmations you're saying, you're going to have like this. I'm saying positive thought. I'm saying my positive affirmations so that I'm not so scared. But then I'm like, quick, say more positive affirmations. You got this underlying kind of anxiety going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, that the positive thinking is just you're trying to force a positive thought over something inside you that's very stressful, and in hopes that if you cover it up enough, the positive thoughts will somehow get rid of all the stress and anxiety inside.
Yeah.
Which is different to the process of the work, where the work is not even is looking directly at the stress and anxiety underneath and questioning that.
Absolutely. Yes. Almost like the one positive is you're still adding, you're trying to get something, you feel deficient maybe, you're trying to pull something into yourself. I need more positive thinking. Whereas this approach, you are subtracting, you are undoing thoughts. You're looking clearly at what's going on inside yourself and just being with it. It's like you're allowing it to be there. I'm going to study this and see what this voice is, why it's having a problem with reality. And it's very exciting, I find.
Yeah, I've described it to people as roughly spirituality. I mean, even that word is, I find, I'm questioning even now, but you can roughly divide it into two camps, bringing in the light, and questioning the darkness.
Yeah, nice way to put it. Yeah.
I put Byron Katie's work as questioning the darkness. And people having a bucket, if they've got their spiritual bucket, they can put in as much light as they want, through chanting, meditation, breathing techniques, positive affirmations, whatever. But if there's holes in the bucket, they're constantly chasing after trying to refill.
Great metaphor.
The work is a very effective means of plugging the holes in that bucket. So it's not taking away from, benefits of other bringing in the light techniques, but it's also exposing some very real deficiencies in those techniques if they're not really dealing with the underlying drip loss of.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to look at that. So it's tricky. It's like really, wow, I'm really sitting here in my darkness. I got to look at it. I'm writing down on the page, all these terrible thoughts that I have, and I'm really letting them be exposed. And it is a courageous act, I think, for people.
So let's go further. Let's go actually into the actual act of the work. So let's go through the 4 questions in a turnaround, and if you could walk through and give your experience for each of the 4 questions in the turnaround.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I always, with that very first step, of course, sort of like really pre-getting to even the questions. I love finding that situation, finding something where you've had a reaction or response, and like somebody's driving you crazy, or you feel very sad or upset. And of course, the range of that is so big. I mean, you can be thinking about death. And one of my initial pieces of work was the death of my father, fairly young. He died of leukemia. It felt fairly young to me. I didn't have children yet. I wasn't, he lived through my childhood, but so I was doing the work on that, very profound, like, why does death happen? I miss him terribly. What's up with that? And writing down how I really felt. That's a pretty deep kind of experience to write about death, but everybody considers it, so you can have that, or you can have being irritated with traffic. You're driving, you're slamming on your horn and yelling at people while you're in traffic. Seems like a little more minor irritation, but makes some of the same sorts of feelings on the inside of being against what's happening.
So what would be an example of thought that we can orient around in, say, traffic, like that everyone can relate to? So what's a simple thought, common thought that we can orient around the 4 questions?
Yeah, let's say like that driver shouldn't have cut me off.
Okay, so the driver shouldn't have cut me off. Okay.
Yeah, such a good one. So you find that moment, and I love that, holding still with the moment. You're going to be writing about it later, even if it's only a half an hour later. But I love sitting down and making sure it's right on paper, right in front of you. So then you've got that thought. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have cut me off. And question number 1. Now you're ready to do the work. Is it true? So, boy, as I said, when I first sat by myself and thought, what was my answer to that question? It was kind of like, well, of course it's true. Like almost, what are you even talking about? Is it true? It was so funny. Even having that question made me realize pretty quickly that I just assumed everything that I was thinking to be true. Mm-hmm. Everything. So I love you almost get to pause and stop. And sometimes when I have a strong reaction, or I'm doing the work with somebody and they have a really strong, feeling of being hurt or bothered, then the answer will be yes. And so Byron Katie's got the second question. Can you absolutely know that it's true? Like, just take another moment. If you answered yes, absolutely, no shadow of a doubt, for all time, if this is your answer. I always like to think of that. There's some game show, but I hear the guy going, is that your final answer?
Right.
And you get to sit and think if there's any exceptions to this moment, to this experience, that guy cut me off. And you might answer yes again. I like, sometimes people who do the work will think, oh, nothing's ever really true. You can't just guarantee it. It's always a no. But that's not really contemplating it. Like, I like sitting with every single, it's a fresh question, and and you might feel like that person really did cut you off. Now I can find they might not have seen you at all. You're in traffic, don't know if they cut you off. So if there's a little grain of doubt, or you might not be called cutting you off or something, you're going to answer no. Mm. See, and even if you get a no, then you get to still move forward with it. You're going to explore this experience more. So the driver shouldn't have cut me off, or they did cut me off. How do you react, and what happens when you believe that? It's
That's question
instant.
3.
Question three. So what's going on when you really think that's true? And that can all happen so quickly. And this is a good example because it happens as fast, when you're actually in a physical motion and stuff's moving and you're in a car. But that same kind of feeling happens when you're just sitting quietly and having a conversation with somebody and then they say something you don't like. Same kind of, here comes the reaction like, oh my God, did they just say that? It happens sort of, a feeling comes in the body. You can feel it. You're believing, and that you're believing it to be the case. You're thinking it's true. So how do you react? Scared, tightened up, gripping the wheel, angry at that person, energy. Like if you had fire coming out of your eyes, you'd be like, yeah. And everyone's seen people that get really upset on the road. They might even like give the finger, yeah, kind of yelling at somebody. So just the feeling of how that is and how you treat that person, like they're a total enemy, like there's somebody who's trying to kill you on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Very frightened. And I always like looking at how am I seeing me? I'm seeing me as very, very vulnerable in this moment. People need to be careful and not threaten me when I'm in my car, So it's I always love, looking at all those things that happen, and it all happens at like a flash of a second. But it takes a little bit of time to be with this. How do you react and what's going on when you're thinking something? Then you get to question 4. And that's the big, wide opening question. And who would you be without that thought? What I love about that question is it invites using the imagination. Who would you be? You don't have to instantly be without the thought.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you be? Like, think about it. Can you imagine what it would be like to not have the thought? So in your car driving, something happens, a person comes close in their car, whatever cutting off actually looks like. And who would you be without the thought, they shouldn't be doing that? They're doing that to me. You would just move, at least the way I answer that question is it's kind of like you would just, like reality would just be kind of unrolling and you'd notice you have a response, you put your brakes on, you move into the other lane, you see something. Many things can be taken in all at once. There's kind of a calmness on the inside, even though you're acting, this happens too with same type of situation when you're actually with someone that you care about and they say something that is, here it raises the stress. I did that a lot with my mother, doing the work on her. I'd just be in her presence and there'd be something, she would say something or do something, I'd be like, and then as I did the work, I'd catch it right in that second. Oh, I feel defensive. And then I would speak up and say, well, Mom, what did you really mean by that in that moment? So who I'd be without the belief being all solid, I might say, when you just said that, I don't know if you realize the way I've normally reacted is I've thought that, and I thought it was a bad thing, or are you criticizing me in this moment? And she'd be like, oh no, honey. It's just, it's very funny what I've discovered by talking to people. Who would you be without the thought? It's sort of more of an active and open sense of curiosity about what's happening, and it's not happening at me, not such a victim. And I love sitting with question 4 and seeing what it feels like without the thought too. Mm. What is this feeling inside? What does my body feel like if I don't have the thought running? That person is harming me. They're cutting me off. They shouldn't do it. You feel the energy is very different. It's kind of, I don't know. There's something more connected. So
we've had, just to recap for people who may be watching this new to the work, so we've identified, so far the order is we've identified a specific situation that is stressful, and then getting cut off in traffic, and then in that situation, identifying the very specific thought that is stressful, like that person shouldn't have cut me off in this example. So then we take that thought, this person shouldn't have cut me off, and put it to the 4 questions. Question 1, is it true? Yes or no. Question number 2, if the answer to the first one is yes, is can you absolutely know that it's true? Again, yes or no. And even if it's still yes, we go on to question 3. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? This person shouldn't have cut me off. And then go to question 4 is who would you be without the thought? This
You got
person should
it.
have cut me off. So now that we've done the 4 questions, what's next?
Then you get to do the turnarounds. And I love the turnarounds. And the turnarounds are, as you're sharing with people, which is great. Some of the trickiest thing, I probably get the most questions around turnarounds
Yeah.
from new people. Because what are these opposites? And how do you, sometimes maybe, the simple opposite, people can grasp that. But, changing places with the other person, mixing it, how do you mix this all up? And then how not to spin off into a bunch of on and on turnarounds too. Um, but I
So
like,
let's use the example then. If
yeah,
he shouldn't have cut me off. So let's just
yeah,
walk through some turnarounds with that.
yeah. Okay. So the most simple, perhaps, is the straight opposite. He should have cut me off. So that's what happened, and it should have happened. So how could that be true? And that's the thing to do with the turnarounds, is you're just looking. It doesn't mean it is now the absolute truth. It's simply looking and seeing. And I love the invitation to find 3 examples or really explore and sit with that turnaround. So, boy, in traffic, in a moment of traffic, when something quick like that is happening, I could see there could be all kinds of possibilities for why he should have cut me off that were happening in that moment. Like maybe he was getting away from someone else. And all as it was actually very well. Whatever cutting off is, it's like coming too close, getting in too tightly. It reminds me to be, maybe I'm being kind of fast. It reminds me to slow down. Are there any advantages? It's really interesting, for this person. And I love in this simple way, that is just what happened. So I'm not saying, when you say this, something shouldn't have happened that actually did. My God, there's so much despair in that in some ways when you really get down to it, because you're wishing for something that could never be true. The thing already happened, So it's depending on the situation, just sitting there and sitting with there. Sometimes the reaction to a turnaround can be like, no, like it really should not have happened. No one should cut anyone off, That's an amazing place to just stop and check and see if you can find examples, at least 3.
So in my experience, when someone's cut me off, and I've I lived in Texas for 5 years, and we have a thing called the Texas wave, which is your response to someone cutting you off. And when I go there, like this, he shouldn't have cut me off, and then I go to the turnarounds. He should cut me off. The examples that I find are A, he should have cut me off, like you said, that he was avoiding something else. B, he should have cut me off because he was moving into the lane, and like you said, I was too close. I was not paying attention, and so he wasn't cutting me off. He was moving into the lane, and I was the one not paying attention. Perhaps, these are just possibilities. He should have cut me off, because he may have learned how to drive very aggressively. Like I've driven in very different spots around the states. LA is different to Boston, which is different to Dallas, and cutting off. And if you go to some countries, you don't
right.
Like in some places,
he's from Turkey,
or Egypt, and it's not against whatever. It's just that there's a different culture of driving there. Like literally, if you're new to Egypt, you are told, do not drive for 2 years until you really understand. Like it's a feel thing. Like it's not. There's videos on YouTube of these incredible intersections that you have no idea amidst the chaos how no one's getting hit, but it's just one unending stream of people cutting each other off, and then pausing and cutting each other off. And it's not cutting off. It's just simply how they drive.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really cool example. It's awesome. Yeah, yeah. And how fun that is. It's like, it's just to get a kick out of, like, oh, this could even be like becoming an advanced in karate, where you're letting things move, or Tai Chi or something,
It actually is. I mean, it's more, if you watch, you can literally go to YouTube and look at you driving in Egypt, and you'll see these videos, and it's incredible. And it's almost like a Zen experience. It's like, how in the world everyone can just flow and amidst so much perceived chaos and not crash
Yeah.
is
Yes.
incredible.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love it. And I mean, in the most, you spend time with this simple thought that
Mhm.
almost seems silly in some ways to some. You could say, wow, in that moment, I noticed this spark of, yeah, quite all right. I noticed this spark of um, fear rise about my safety on the
Mhm.
planet. And you get to reflect on, like, oh, I'm sometimes vulnerable being a human being on planet Earth. And one of my one of my great interests here is noticing how, well, in many ways, how very safe I am, and how in other ways that is the way of life. Is you have no idea you might get hit by a bus tomorrow, and then could that be okay too? Instead of like being like Chicken Little and running around, afraid of everything all the time.
So what's
Afraid.
another turnaround from he shouldn't have cut me off?
So I shouldn't have cut him off. I love flipping places with the other person.
Now, for some people watching, that's like that may seem very confusing because there's not literally you didn't cut him off, but how is it possible that in something that's not physically in reality that could be a turnaround?
I love it. What a great question. And it's noticing whatever this to spend time with. Could it be that I have the same, um, have I done this before? Do I have the same kind of energy? Well, like I wrote notice right away. I'm cutting that person off when I'm believing they are a total threat and a complete enemy
Mhm.
and a jerk for being such a terrible driver. So fast. I'm cutting off that person as a fellow human being on the road.
You're cutting them off not literally with your car, but you're cutting them off with your consciousness. Like you're cutting them off as any possibility of being a human being with a complex world in their own life and with emotions and other, you're cutting them off.
Yeah, yes. So in this moment, there's just some contact coming from them between us. Here we are on a road in the world, and they've come very close. And my whole reaction is they came too close. They
Mhm.
got too close, and I want to get I'm being very abrasive and kind of like have attack thoughts
Mhm.
towards them doing that. That's kind of a cutoff, you know. Um, so that's a strong way I think of it. And for all I know, what's interesting is as I look at the situation, I could have cut them off and not even known it. I mean, there could have been something like they didn't recognize I was there. Like you were saying moments ago, I pulled up kind of close. They needed to get over.
That you were
Um,
cutting them off, even though if it was from behind, encroaching on their space. They were cutting
yeah.
off their access to the lane.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Where I
So
also go with it is like I cut them off. It's like I have a moment when I believe the thought that they cut me off. I have this moment of seeking revenge. Like I'll show them, make them feel what I feel. So in my moment, I'm like, ooh, I just want to go cut them off, And
yeah.
so in my
Yeah.
mind, I'm cutting them off, literally in my head, of not physically. I want to find an opportunity to cut them off with my car.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that one. Right. I mean, they call it road rage for a reason. That
Hmm.
this happens. It's like um, yeah, I mean, and you can hear the rant that sometimes goes in your mind about like people should, yeah, they shouldn't do that. They should wait and be look, what's his problem?
Hmm.
So definitely, there's a cutting off, and I mean, I could definitely even feel I don't ever want to get to know that person. If I have that initial reaction, um, I'm kind of cut. I hope I never see them again, and
You cut them
their
off.
car gets,
Yeah, you
yeah.
cut them out of your life. Just boom, cut
Yeah,
off.
yeah. And we do that, don't we? With like other, I was mentioned earlier, same types of reactivity with my own mother. Fine, hang up the phone, fume, fume, fume. I'm never going over to her house again. Or whatever. Like just the way we'll do that is sort of like this impulse. I'm going to chop that off out of my
So
life.
so then what's the other turnaround with he shouldn't have cut me off?
I love this one. When you just take the other party out of it and you turn everything around to yourself. I shouldn't have cut myself off.
So
In
so
that moment,
yeah.
I
In that
shouldn't
moment,
have
how
cut.
do you cut you off?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first place I go is I think I I felt very abrasive and like thinking of all those attack and self-defending thoughts and tightened up, and lashing out at a stranger I don't even know who's in a car, cutting off my sense of great connection and even humor, you know, and noticing that I'm actually perfectly fine. My car was not even touched.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm cutting off all these other options. I'm cutting myself off, maybe from even my own true nature, depending on what you're doing the work on. My true nature feels like to be connected. I keep seeing that with other people, anyone I work with.
Mm-hmm.
They really like why they're alarmed about something is truly what they really love inside is being very connected and being curious and liking other people, even if you're really introverted, like I tend to be. It's you know, the yeah, being aligned sort of with that person. And also, I'm cutting myself off in that moment by getting all worked up, you know, over something that was a split second, and then it was over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm thinking, so I'm going maybe on a whole rant about how people shouldn't drive that way. Did you see that? You know,
Mm-hmm.
to somebody else in the car. Maybe I tell the story later, and I notice that happens a lot in different situations doing the work. You know, where you kind of repeat and mull over and regurgitate and see over again.
I had this funny image, you know, like the idea of he cut me off, you know, that he's in my lane, he's in my personal space. And it's like, and I cut myself off, I have now taken that thought into my personal space. Like, that's now too, you know, it's, this thought is careening, boom, you know, into my lane, my thinking lane.
That's
And,
nice. Yeah, I
uh,
love that.
and then what's even ironic is that in my experience of when I've had the thought, oh, he cut me off, in that moment I cut myself off from my awareness. And the irony is I'm now at more risk of cutting someone else off because I'm now lost my awareness of who's behind me, who's next to me, and the lanes
Totally.
to my left and right.
Yes, I love that. Right. I love that. Sometimes, you know, this moment happens, and then there's all this, even watching that person's car, you know, moving like, where are they? You know, or now I'm passing the guy now, and there's all this, yeah, sense of being in someone else's business, which is sort of one of the invitations or one of the ways Byron Katie will talk about.
I had an experience. It's related. I had an experience at one of the schools for the work. It was in LA, you know, and you do the morning walk, and you're doing the morning walk, and there's like lots of cars driving along, and I had this image of like the mind is like a highway full of cars. You've got colorful thoughts, you've got honking thoughts, you've got trucks that thoughts that give off a lot of pollution. You've got very efficient, nice-looking thoughts. You've got thoughts that collide with one another, or try to avoid one another, or cut each other off, or have thought rage. You know, about, oh, this thought shouldn't have had, you know, this and that, and that I also noticed that there's actually more space between the cars than there are cars, and that it's only momentary where it appears that there's this traffic jam of stressful thoughts altogether. And it's the traffic jam of thoughts that I remember, not the gaps between
Mm,
between the thoughts.
so beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that. That's very powerful. I love that metaphor. It's great. And the gaps, I mean, yeah, that space. It's incredible. It'll be sort of there is so much space in our day. And, but the thoughts that kind of like, you know, crunch down or feel like they've got this tightness or something you want to be against or justify or whatever it is when you really get onto something, it's like you know, the focus comes really in real tight. And then, yeah, then it's easy to lose that sense of all that empty space that happens in the day too. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's great.
so we've gone through the actual mechanics of the work, the 4 questions in turnaround. Is it true? Can you absolutely know that it's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Who would you be without the thought? And then the three most commonly used turnarounds, turning it around. So the opposite, turning it around. The opposite being he should have cut me off. Turning it around to the other is I shouldn't have cut him off, and then turning it to the self is I shouldn't have cut myself off. So one common question that I get and that I ask everyone I interview is, what is the difference between the work and psychology, specifically CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy? Because
Mm.
I get this a lot. Well, the work is just a version of cognitive behavioral therapy, and I have my answer to that. But what's yours?
Well, that's great. It'll be fun to hear what your thoughts are about that too. I the thing about the work and I've read and studied some. I mean, having a graduate degree in psychology, I know what you're talking about with cognitive behavioral theory and different theories and ways of modalities that are geared for healing and psychology, looking at and understanding. It is, for me, it is so incredibly simple. That's the number one. There's something very, very different, very simple. You're using the same four questions over and over again, and then sitting and really contemplating them. And who knows what will come of that? Sometimes I even think, the mind is so fast and so full, at least in my experience, that it can go off on different trails and down different tangents. And this kind of brings it back to like a really, really super, super simple way of questioning. And you're using these difficult situations and the ones that simply come to you. So not necessarily day to day, even though those are definitely worthy of doing the work. But as I began to do the work, I would go far back into my distant past and even imagining what the future would look like and fears that I had had or nightmares, and spending time with each one of those kinds of situations or experience, kind of how I felt about the universe in some ways, being here, and using the work to take a look at that. So it seems like it goes, to me, just very, very deeply and beyond just behavioral science, daily, how I am interacting with, something that I'm trying to address that doesn't seem to be working. Definitely works well for that, but it's there's also a basic assumption. Nothing wrong, because I had this for a long time, and I suppose we wouldn't enter the work or anything with that, didn't experience some kind of suffering. We're curious about how do I work with that. But there is, just in the whole realm of psychology, come to a therapist that I've been to, there is something wrong with me. And so that's why I'm here. And I want to ask myself questions and understand my behavior. And I definitely want to change my behavior. My motive is I must change. And this is inviting you to wipe all that out. Like, let's just start from zero and have not necessarily any direction we're trying to get.
This meaning the work, or this meaning psychology?
Yeah, no, the work. Yeah, we're not trying to get anywhere. We're not trying to fix something or.
Well, it's not trying to fix something. I mean, frequently for me, I do the work when something is bothering me. So I'm trying to, on some level, fix this stress and anxiety that I'm going through, and it's like, it's different. I mean, for me, it's like I'm looking at, okay, I'm really stressed out here. I want to know what's going on, as opposed to like I am in pain, or I need to do something with my bank balance, or I need to solve this problem. So I'm going to use the work as a tool to fix a problem. Instead I'm focusing on the work of like I'm not clear mentally about something.
Yeah.
And
yeah, good way to put it. Yeah. So maybe like that's how I would see it, is a lot of therapeutic modalities are there's a end goal to make sure you're I don't know, you function in a different way. You behave, nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's like, of course people want to be, it looks like there's a problem and I want to be different, or I want to experience life differently. But I love how the work brings it back to, like you just mentioned, your own experience of stress and anxiety. Let's study it. What's going on here? Where could that be coming from? What am I actually thinking? What's happening? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's just a little bit of a different, for me, it's become less of a goal in mind. It's just saying, well, something's happening. I see. I'm feeling some stress.
So specifically CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, how is the work different from cognitive behavioral therapy?
That's the one I'm thinking of the most. I know I heard Byron Katie speak about saying it's the closest to cognitive behavioral therapy. Like that, this method appears to be the closest to that method, which has questions that you ask yourself, mm-hmm. And a means of questioning. But I would say that's where I see the primary difference is you're really exploring and studying this anxiety in a very open field way, like open-minded way to see to with the idea that you're going to come to some sort of understanding with the work. Just adding that goal that there is a right way to be, there's a behavioral way to be that's the right way, and I'm not being that way. And so I'm going to do this modality or ask questions so that I can kind of fix myself is a little bit different. I want to, yeah. What have you found when you look at it?
The cognitive behavioral. I mean, both my parents are psychiatrists, and I have a cousin of mine that's was the last step. People got their PhDs in psychiatry in Manhattan. So I'm very well immersed in that field, and it seems like a lot of therapy can be very goal driven. You have a problem, we need to fix this problem, like you said, to fix this behavior is wrong or bad or troubling or even dangerous, or it's like depression is a thing we have to destroy or numb. Like it's a thing that has to be fixed. And with the work, we're not coming. People may enter into the work from a place of pain. When most people come to any type of technique to find resolution or peace because they're in pain. I mean, that's usual, but it's not the premise of the work is, oh, you're depressed, we're here to fix your depression, and we're going to change this behavior after you do these 3 specific thoughts, and magically it's going to be fixed. You need 6 sessions, and this, we're going to follow this flowchart. So with cognitive behavioral therapy, even though I'm not trained in it, etc., my observation is that, like a lot of psychology, is that it's top-down advice oriented, that there's the expert, I know what's best for you, I'm going to put you through a series of questions, but it's kind of top-down, I'm giving you advice from the professional to the layperson. And with the work, it's not that at all. It's all the advice comes from the inside, is that my turnarounds come from within. The facilitator can help facilitate the process, the mechanics of the work, and hold space. But the conclusions are coming from the inside of the person who's doing the work. And it's that they're experiential from the inside. It's not a top-down approach. Suggestions may be offered, but Katie, I think, does a brilliant job of ensuring, particularly if people go through the Institute for the work, that the facilitator has no motive of trying to be the expert or force an outcome or implant an experience on people or somehow manipulate the experience of the person doing the work. And that's fundamentally different from psychology, where you are trying to navigate the person,
Yeah.
And it's just a different, psychology it's a different approach to how to try to help someone, and
sort of, it really has a don't know. I don't know. I don't have all the answers at all, and I even don't know what the outcome, and I don't even know the length of time or the person's, purpose and path specifically. In fact, you kind of delete your own opinions about any of what's happening with somebody else. They're just there answering the questions, and you trust. I found you can completely trust. It's amazing, people's own insight, because they know their own life. You know your own self the best. You've been with you the whole time. That no one, even if you get to know somebody well over time working with them, but nobody knows themselves like they do.
Even, and I remember out of school, someone brought up psychology, and Katie talked about how it was like the California Board for Psychologists actually not tried to sue her, or they confronted her, claiming that she was practicing psychology without a license or something similar. And they came, and they all, this group or people came to her, and they said, well, you're giving people advice, and that's practicing without a license. And Katie's like, I'm not giving anyone advice. This is, look at the questions yourselves. Where's the advice? They're giving, and it's like, in the psychology, people, they're like, oh, okay. Now you actually get credit for your psychology post-grad, continuing education in the work. They not only saw that she wasn't practicing without a license because there was no advice giving. They saw the tremendous value in what she was doing. Like, oh, our people should know this. Oh, so now you get credit, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I do all the workshops that I offer. I now can give continuing education units too in my
yeah,
area in
cool,
Washington.
right?
Yeah, and it started with Katie's work is totally, valid as being, yeah, offering. And when I went to the school, there was no talk of getting, CEUs, even though I could have used them at the time. And it was just, but now I guess you can get, like 50 in one. You can handle your
I
two
don't,
years worth of CEUs in
yeah.
one swoop.
Sure. I mean, my dad, when he had to get his credits renewed for his medical license, like he would, there's this entire small industry of want to get 25 units at a time or 50 units at a time for your whatever your cycle is. So
Yeah, totally.
going back to this thing about, I asked these two questions of people I interview. So, what are the most common mistakes people new to the work, brand new to the work? What are the most common mistakes that you frequently see?
Ah, that's very funny. I write a blog, and yesterday I wrote the 10, 10 ways to do the work if you want to fail miserably, or something like that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, I'll mail you a copy.
That's
I
great.
have lots
Okay.
of comments, and
I'll put a link to that in the yeah, in the notes
yes,
for that'd be
it's
fantastic. I can't wait.
yeah,
I actually want to read that right now, but yeah, go ahead.
yeah, yeah.
So just
And one of them,
yeah, go ahead.
one of the highlights is I have to do the work on myself. Like people say, I know it's just terrible to judge other people. I'm kind of over that. I've done a lot of therapy and different programs, and I've healed many relationships in my life. I understand why my parents were the way they are, and I just want to do the work on myself. So, I mean, almost every workshop I ever lead, when there's a new person, somebody will say, "Can I do my worksheet on myself?" And I say, "Well, the tricky thing about doing it on yourself is you have such a strong motivation to change. You are not willing to look and see who you've been or whatever this thing is that you don't like about yourself, and kind of study it and let it be there. You're going to do the work for this outcome,
Hmm.
so that you become a different person. And I had done the work myself, and then I realized what Katie was talking about, why she suggested that so strongly. Don't do it on yourself, especially when you start. Doesn't mean it's impossible. I've seen people get up on the stage with her and do an entire worksheet only on themselves, and she's facilitated them through
Hmm.
many of the beliefs on there. But it's the critical mind towards the self is so strong and intense. It's hard to find that. You're really clear about other people and what they're doing wrong and what they are saying that they shouldn't say. And it just to hold let that projection be there is a really wonderful way of exploring, and it breaks it down and begin to dissolve when there's other people doing what they're doing, and you become more aware that, oh, there's a purpose, or it's okay that they're doing what they're doing, or just studying it, letting it, no outcome, as we've been talking about, even in the previous questions you've asked, like, no, I'm not on the warpath for, making sure I am different. I become different. It's just a side effect when you do the work on other people. I found they do become different, but it's so that's the number one place. And they're very, when you do the work on yourself, you can get very broad categories too. So it's hard for the mind to anchor down into specific situations. You'll just think, oh, I'm terrible about making decisions, or I've just never been good with money, or that, they'll just say these really broad, and they'll have many examples, situations from the past, and then it makes it kind of it stays a little on the surface, and it doesn't really drill, I think, down into some of the
Hmm.
places that can offer insight. So I always really recommend, if somebody's new, go ahead and do it on somebody else. I just did a workshop at my house last weekend, and a woman, it was the same. She wanted to do it on herself. And I said, but is there anybody? I know I don't really have anybody that I judge in my life. I said, not anybody, even just a little irritation. Oh, well, there's this one friend that,
Hmm.
every time I have been avoiding getting together with her. I'm like, do it on her, do it on her.
My,
And
my favorite technique is if someone can't land, or the people, oh, I know it's all about me. I just,
yes.
it's just, everyone's fine. I'm just working on me. So and it reminds me, and it kind of reminds me of Unikitty from the Lego movie. Yeah.
That's
I,
great.
it's like the saccharine sweet, everything's wonderful and perfect, and I shove all the negative, dark thoughts down deep inside me so I never feel them again. Blink, blink, you know? And
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
if for these, there's a way to pull people out of that, which is, okay, think of someone you love and wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you'll find a stressful thought somewhere.
That's nice. Right. Just a little tiny way that they could be improved or
And it's
something.
bait, it's bait. They can't not, because you say, "Oh, just think of someone you love," and like they just went off on how loving they are, and I was like, "Okay, great. Think of someone you love.
Right.
Go for it." Yeah.
Yes. I love it. Yeah.
So
It's
with
very, yeah.
with the time we have left, I wanted to ask you one more. So you've got that blog post on common mistakes. I can't wait to read that and put links to
Okay.
that. I'm yeah, very excited. The other, I'm even thinking of doing not a gag reel, but like a common mistake reel, just kind of stitching together everyone's, experiences of common mistakes are, and just kind of making
Sure.
one long reel of that. Anyway, what are the most common misconceptions people have about the work? It's different than mistakes they have doing the work. What is their most common misconceptions about the work?
Ah, there's there's a couple that I can think of, and the first that comes to mind is that it's all about just thinking. Like people, I've had some people say, "Oh yeah, the work. I kind of know what Byron Katie does," or I might have even read Loving What Is, and it's all about just your brain, your mental energy, your mind functions, and flipping thoughts around and looking at things differently that way. But I like to be more in my body. I've had that people say that. I like to do body work, body oriented, or there's a lot of mind body healing and things like that. I find that such a misperception. There is, yes, you use your mind, this amazing mind, to kind of answer questions, but there's only four questions, and they are profound. I mean, they might be simple, they're not always easy, that's for sure. But you get to use your imagination and feel your whole body. Katie will often ask people, or there was like sub questions on her like facilitation guide at the school, and it's,
Hmm.
where do you feel that thought in your
In
body
your body.
when you're thinking? Yeah, who would you be? How would you feel without the thought, so that you can get the sense of your present, your real experience, your experience being right in the presence of that person or in that situation you don't like, and what it can feel like for you. And that's very body oriented. I mean, stress is like just something happens in the mind, the way you're perceiving, and then boom, you feel it all through your body. So to me, it's a very much body mind experience, and using your imagination to stay with that, especially in question four. So that's a misperception, that you have to be like your brainy thinking type if you're doing the work. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in my head all the time. Like it's bad to be in your head all the time. But I don't think that's the way the work is. That's a misperception. Um, and the second one that I think of most quickly is that by doing the work, you're condoning behavior that is terribly violent, the worst things that happen among humanity that have been going on for years, wars. You're like that. You'll do the work on that, and you wind up with turnarounds that are, being beaten by somebody is fine. That was fine, no problem. That's a very trite kind of surface way. There's no condoning in any of that. It's simply being with that dark experience, like from where we first started at the beginning, and studying it in more of a matter and just seeing if that's all that's there. Because I find every time it's not, and that you survived a situation and it's over now. That's just even understanding that is quite profound. That there's change, there's nothing static. So that's a misperception, I think, too. It's like, you're saying it's okay that terrible things, the world is a horrible place. And no, it's not about that. But it's looking at what those things are that we think of are horrible. And can we be in those experiences with this strange world that nobody really knows what's going on around here and actually be open with it, be excited about what's happening. And I
Yeah.
find then you can also even have this energy of like joy about what's happening, and you can work like if you've had a terribly violent past, for example, you do the work and you might feel like, oh my God, I understand. And you might be an agent for change of violence, and like be somebody who speaks out and shares, and in a really kind of underlying joyful way. Very different than condoning it. Yeah.
It's interesting going the you know the turnarounds. I mean, the turnarounds for me. I mean, that's where I got stuck a lot. I mean, that's why I went through the effort to try to make worksheet and things like that to try to help myself and now others get through the turnarounds. And then this whole thing of like, well, some people don't even want to go to the turnaround because it's like they don't even want the possibility of condoning a negative behavior. And my response to that is that the intention of the turnarounds is not to find a new perpetrator or a new victim, or to shift blame, or to find a new crime, or to say everything that's horrible and harmful in the world is okay because we're doing it. Like, it's not that at all. It's simply to crack the credibility of the original stressful thought. That if there is some way that the opposite is true, even if the negative behavior is 99.999999% totally understandable as negative and harmful, is there some situation, some possibility, even if it's 0.0 to the -6th decimal, and the intention is not to condone the behavior, the intention is to break you free from the stress of believing that original stressful thought, which is, usually by this time they've gone through question 3, how do they react? They've been reliving that trauma for hours a day for years and years and years. Yes. And so it's like the very thing they feel is so horrible that shouldn't be condoned, they've been condoning in their own mind by constantly reliving it. Like, it's okay to do because they've been doing it in their own head. Not saying that it's okay to do, but it's what's been happening. Yeah. So to find freedom from that terrible act in their own mind, that's the turnaround, is just to find, even if a smidgen, if the opposite is true, it just puts a chink in the armor of the original stressful thoughts and plaguing me for days, weeks, months, years, or decades.
Yeah, really wonderful way to put it. And I like that, the just taking a look and seeing, I mean, when you're a baby and you're a child, you don't know that death is terrible, violence is terrible, and it is learned. It's something about the human interaction or humanity. Mm-hmm. And even if that's in reality, like I remember asking Katie, I'm doing the work a whole bunch on the same person and nothing's changing. And she, after some discussion, she said to me, Grace, how do you know you're supposed to be angry? You are. And I just realized in that moment, I've been so against anger. Mm-hmm. I'm against other people being angry and how violent they get. And I'm so anti-anger that I'm angry about anger. And if I let it be there, even if I don't know why it happens and I don't know why wars happen, there's something very different about then how I operate, how I am. And I'm not saying that the wars are okay, but I'm just not making a war myself against the war. Well,
we actually answered your own question, at least according to my understanding, and I agree with Katie's, that wars happen because war is just simple. War amongst nations, amongst people, is simply the grossest physical manifestation of people at war with their own thoughts.
Yes.
The war happens because people have stressful thoughts they believe, and how do they react? They want to kill the other party.
Yeah.
It can literally be simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, we're running out of time here, and so what I want to two things. One is I want to acknowledge the other thing you said about the misconceptions, that people can just read the book and think they got it. Read Loving What Is, like, oh yeah, I understand everything. They don't actually do it. They don't actually do it, and they have to doing it just only once, like maybe even doing it once or twice, but actually going in and really doing it. And the whole thing of the mind-body connection is like an interview I did with Todd Smith, this kind of came out where like a thought, with all these thoughts that fly through our head, but when a thought is attached to a sensation or a location in the body, that's when the thought becomes a belief. The distinction between, the connection between a thought and a belief is a sensation in the body, and that's an emotion is a sensation in the body. And different emotions are different types of sensations in the body, in different locations in the body. So it's like we're working on beliefs, which is fundamentally, by definition, body-based. You cannot have a belief without it being in the body. It's impossible. So the work is body-based, because we're working on what is body, the thoughts that are based in the body, which are beliefs.
Yeah. I love that. So true. You have the reaction. That's how you start. I like that. It's a temple bell or ding ding, gong, hello. Because you feel it in your body first. That's where you know.
Yeah.
then you have the picture and you remember what happened, or you got what's going on. You move from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so your website is workwithgrace.com. Now, what I know about when I've talked to certified facilitators, usually certified facilitators, they almost always, they work with anyone, anyone with a stressful thought, but usually there's a specific certified facilitators, they like do teleseminars or programs. They usually focus on a couple specific areas that they really love to help people with. So
Sure.
what
Yeah.
are those areas that you really feel you just love working with people? And
Yeah.
if you have existing programs, whether they're evergreen as recordings or kind of they sign up and then it rolls over every couple months or a year, what are those programs that people can learn more about you?
Yeah. Well, my most long-term in-depth program is called Eating Peace.
Hmm.
And I had an eating disorder. I was anorexic and bulimic, and took a decade before I was done with the symptoms, and then probably another decade of healing from that. That's a whole, yeah, journey. And it's been many, many years now of being completely free from it. And I felt the work was like this final piece of understanding and freeing, being completely free. Just completely free, not having to manage eating or anything at all, like being like you are when you're a little kid. And so I've got this program. I started with a smaller, short little program, only 8 week sessions, and it just wasn't enough for when you have eating issues. I mean,
Hmm.
8 sessions, 2 months, not enough. So this is longer, and I do an in-person retreat where I'm together with the people from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and we eat all meals together, and I guide everybody through every bite. It's very fun, very
Oh, cool.
powerful.
All right. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just love it. And I'm in Seattle, Washington. That's where I've done eating peace in London once. Wasn't quite to the expanded to the level that I do it now, the way I have the curriculum and what we all do
Mhm.
for 3 days. But I love that, and how I find eating really, it's a reaction to other beliefs.
Mhm.
You have other beliefs running, it's a reaction. But still, in itself, there's a lot you can do with that reaction and that experience, to heal that process. Can be so self-condemning for people. And then I've got these other 5 other teleclasses that I do. I just rotate through them: parenting, relationships, sexuality. The eating piece one is in there, and then I'm not remembering it off the top of my head, but I teach these every so often. And pain, sickness, and death. That's the
The
third one.
small pieces,
That
the small
exciting?
things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just the little, the
Pain, little topics: pain,
yeah, yeah,
sickness,
yeah.
sex, sexuality, eating disorders, parenting,
Right, right.
relationships.
Money,
Little stuff.
money,
Money.
money.
Okay, yeah.
I love the money class. Oh my God. So that's fun. I limit. There's usually 12 people at maximum, and we just go for 8 weeks together. But I have these exercises that I just did myself. Kind of like how to drill into where your beliefs are originating, you think, and what's happening, and where that all comes from, and then really taking it to inquiry and hearing other people's work and sharing. So it's very fun. I love it.
Cool. All right. So thank you very much, Grace. This was wonderful, and
Yeah,
I look forward to doing a couple more interviews with you, very focused in on on some specifics on the work itself.
fabulous.
And so again, this is Grace, and her website is workwithgrace.com. Thank you very much. This was a real pleasure, real honor to chat with you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sam, for doing this. All right.
Okay.
Take care. Bye
You too.
bye.
Bye.